In the wake of the killing of Charlie Kirk, there have been recriminations coming from the right, finding anyone on social media who posted anything that they didn't like about Charlie Kirk or didn't express, in their view, the proper sentiments surrounding his murder. This is happening at a number of levels. There's like a organic sort of right-wing cultural effort to find these and put them in a database and contact their employers, et cetera. And there also is increasingly, it looks like, a coming crackdown coming from the federal government. Let me go ahead and start with Senator Katie Britt, who says in one breath that, you know, Charlie Kirk was assassinated because he was in part because he was such a beacon of free speech. And in the next breath, talks about how if you're not expressing the proper sentiments, you should be held accountable, you should be fired, et cetera. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
The rhetoric that led us to this moment, calling President Trump a fascist, calling him Hitler, you had news organizations and mainstream media celebrating that, allowing those things to take place and be said on their networks. Right. That is dangerous. When you look at that, when you look at where we are, when you look at how we got here, now people that are celebrating Charlie's murder, celebrating a political assassination, that should never happen in the United States of America. And Maria, we must do more. We must stand firm, and there must be consequences with regards to people spewing that type of hate and celebration in the face of this. And I believe that there will be, and I certainly plan to hold them accountable. So if you are out there and you are celebrating the political assassination of a man who was exercising his free speech, a very foundational element, a cornerstone of who we are as the United States of America, you should be held accountable. You should be fired. And that is the beginning and the end of it, full stop.
And we're going to show you some of the specifics of the posts that they find objectionable. You know, some of them, in my opinion, like I strongly disagree with. I obviously condemn political violence. We've been very clear about our position on that on this show. Some of them are actually literally just reposting some of Charlie's more inflammatory quotes. Some of them are saying it's wrong that he got shot, but I'm not going to mourn his death because he was a hateful person. I disagree with his political ideology. So those are the types of posts that they're coming after. And we're not talking about either from public figures. You know, every mainstream Democrat I know of has condemned the killing of Charlie Kirk. We're talking about random, like, teachers, professors, whoever out there in the world. And Saagar, you know, I don't even think they really care that much about the hypocrisy burn that's like in evidence in that clip, because I think the sense is, and you can tell me if, you know, if I'm off on this, the sense is like, y'all did this to us and now we're just going to do it right back.
That's part of it. That's certainly part of it, which I think we could all sympathize with if you've been victim or something, been attacked by it. I think there's also, I want to say this as well. The overwhelming thing I have heard from a lot of my more right-wing friends is I feel like Charlie and I were not that far apart. You know, everyone is like, oh, I disagreed with him on this. So to watch people celebrate his death, and let's be honest, there are extremely viral posts of people who are doing that. It's a free country, you're allowed to. I want to be very, very clear. But to watch that at an organic societal level is deeply wounding at one, and also makes you personally afraid and potentially facing retribution. I think those are legitimate feelings. So first I want to like validate that. I think it's scary. I mean, you know, for me, Charlie and I, look, we disagreed certainly, probably the most on Israel, but like we weren't that far apart on a lot of stuff. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier in our A block, where it's like, okay, we're just memes now, like humans are memes. Well, and apparently, you know, if somebody gunned me down in cold blood, somebody would probably find a video of me on BLM or trans and be like, fuck him. And that's, you know, look, I gotta be honest, I had to sit with that for a while and just be like, wow, okay, that's a thing.
Can I echo what you're saying there? Because, you know, obviously Charlie and I were different on almost every issue, but yeah, you're like, there are also people out there who think I am like hateful and horrible and evil for a variety of reasons as well. And I, you know, have no doubt that would be the case for me too. And, you know, we'll talk more about the Israel piece tomorrow, but it's also the case that even as Charlie Kirk and I are as different as we could possibly be politically, ideologically, it's also the case that there were some shared enemies. There were some shared, so I totally get why I find it shocking and deeply unsettling and horrifying. And I think, which is why, I think if you are on the political left and you think it's in any way good that he was murdered, like, I don't know what you're thinking. This is not any sort of benefit to your political project, if that's what you're measuring this on. And part of this block is we are going to see very swiftly, and Stephen Miller is already signaling it, Donald Trump is also signaling it, we are going to see this used as a justification for further crackdowns on left-wing organizations, left-wing speech. Certainly pro-Palestine sentiment has already been in the crosshairs. That's going to be amped up. This will be used as justification for further crackdowns.
Yeah, but then let's get to the social question. And actually, this is it's funny. I think I came out of the woke era and said, I'm against cancel culture in all forms. But actually, more recently, we were all having a discussion. I remember, I think it was about the Jubilee fascist guy.
Yeah.
And you were like, yeah, he should be fired. And I was like, yeah, maybe he should. And so then I'm like, okay, do we all believe in cancel culture? And then in a certain extent, yes. And if I think about the movements that I have been the most critical of, BLM and Me Too. Well, nobody who's critical of Me Too says maybe some people, says Harvey Weinstein, outside of Candace and a few others, nobody's like, Harvey Weinstein's innocent and he didn't do anything wrong. You can critique the legal case, but at the very least at a social, moral level, we're like, yeah, Harvey Weinstein, fuck him. All right. Matt Lauer, fuck him. Who else is in the OG Me Too? I'm trying to think of a few other names. Like those people. But then, Me Too, the criticism, which I think is fair, is it quickly descended from Harvey Weinstein to Aziz Ansari. And that's crazy. And so to the extent that we're pushing back, it's about Aziz. Same with BLM. Anybody who was like George Floyd deserved to get murdered, yeah, I think we would all justly say, why is that person in polite society? Now anybody who says, I don't think there should be violent rioting and looting and defunding the police is stupid, if that person loses their job, I think we should say, that's bad. So that's where I am here with this Charlie Kirk thing. And maybe that's hypocritical. It may be, to be honest, because it's actually our conversations about that fascist Groyper or whatever, who was on Jubilee and got fired. And I'm like, yeah, maybe he should be fired. And so it's
apparently,
one of those
by the
where
way, he'd been fired before.
Okay, but whatever.
But yeah,
I mean, my point is just
the intellectual point
if somebody,
stands, yeah.
I saw a video of a guy who hung a swastika flag outside of his house. And I'm like, yeah, if I'm his neighbor, I'm gonna be like, hey man, fuck you. It's one of those where you hung a Nazi flag outside of that, and I'm not going to, I would go to court to defend his right to do so, and I would also say, go fuck yourself. And so that's kind of where I am at now with this Charlie Kirk thing, where I think it's becoming way too far already, and the witch hunt is ongoing. But also, if you're a teacher and you're out there and you're saying he deserved to die, I'm sorry, you should not be teaching children. If you're an airline pilot and you're saying he should deserve to die, you should not be in charge of flying 300 people around. You literally have a responsibility to all of these people in the background. And if you just don't care about their personal death, if you are not even just protecting for responsibility, teacher, professor, social worker, etc. I mean, last time I checked, social work is about empathy. Half the people who are coming in for mental illness are all just left wing? No, you have to be able to have some sort of relations, So my point around cancel culture, or shall we now call it consequence culture, to borrow the initial. Here's the thing, the leftists were correct in one form, is that we do need guardrails on polite society for employment. And I actually think everybody at this point does kind of agree. The fight should be around the boundary, and the fight should first of all, we need to keep the government out of it. And so to that extent, it's ridiculous. But we absolutely need to look at it very specifically and have a real convo about what does this mean? We literally, and as the meme says, we live in a society. And so for me, for a lot of my conservative friends and others, I got an email from a great friend of mine. I don't think he would mind me saying this. And he's like, I walk around and I look at a barista or something, and I know they don't want to kill me, but it's one of those where I have to wonder, would they cheer my death? That's really scary, I think, for a lot of people. And I would transpose it onto how the mass hysteria, again, over BLM, or Me Too, or any of these other mass cancellation things, where it very quickly went from legitimate issue, we have to have a national conversation, which we did, I think it's fair, to just full-on mass hysteria. People who are like, hey, I think rioting and looting are bad, are getting fired, people are getting censored, all that. That was nuts. It was totally nuts. And I said so, at the time. But that's the issue, is that it's very obvious that it very quickly descends from legitimate to not illegitimate, but much more on the edge, right?
Right.
And that is the cultural problem of all political movements, is that they take something which is legitimate and then it turns into a mass hysteria, power grab. And unfortunately now left, right, look, we all know now, watching the government over the last decade or so, nobody has any principles around this stuff.
Yep.
Okay, it's all just a thing about a race to the bottom. And actually I find that the most distressing because, Charlie, I don't know his own personal feelings. I have never talked to him about this. I have a general suspicion he would be against most cancel culture. I mean, this was a person who I do think believed in free speech. Or at the very least, if confronted with this set of circumstances, has called for grace for people in the past who have even said terrible and objectionable things, hired some of them as well, and gave it a second chance. I tend to suspect that if confronted with it and asked in a one-on-one, I don't think he would be okay with it. But at the same time, and I'm talking about the edge cases here, but at the same time, I don't know, how can we expect to live with people in positions of power who do hold these thoughts and are able to express them publicly while holding their job? That's a genuine question I don't know. And that's a social media question too.
Yeah.
To me.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the cultural, I think you raised some really interesting points. And here's where you're correct. The culture, first of all, we're going to get to the government piece. I think we'll be in complete alignment that government coming in and saying you can't do this, you can't say you must mourn Charlie Kirk, and if you don't mourn him appropriately, we're going to take your, take your passport, or we're going to infiltrate left-wing groups. All of that, we're going to be completely opposed to. And that stuff is being floated right now by Stephen Miller and Donald Trump. I don't know if you saw, he shared some TikTok calling for a Charlie Kirk-inspired, effectively, Ministry of Truth to crack down on media organizations. And I know we're going to be opposed to that across the board.
Absolutely.
The cultural piece is, you're right, it is more complex. And here's why. Because I do think that we need some level of shame in society.
Right. Exactly.
Because now people feel comfortable, to go back to the some of the things I pose on the right wing and your fascist Groyper example, people feel comfortable posting just overt Nazi shit on Maine.
Yeah, that's right.
And feel like there will be no consequences for that. And I don't think that that is healthy in a society.
I agree.
And especially when you have an intersection with what their job actually is. So for example, if you are a teacher and you have a classroom of diverse students.
A taxpayer-funded teacher too, especially.
And you have a classroom full of diverse students, white, black, brown, all sorts of class, socioeconomic, whatever, and you're out there posting overtly racist or Nazi content, that is directly impacting your ability to do your job.
Completely.
And so for me, those are the most sort of clear-cut examples where it's yeah, you can't continue to employ that person. Just to add some context to what we're talking about here with these posts. So there's a large-scale effort, but organic as far as we know, effort for people to be able to effectively find these social media posts, submit them to a database, and they've allegedly got thousands of instances of, again, we're not talking about politicians, we're talking about random people throughout the country saying things they find objectionable. Now, that original database, what was the original URL? It was Charlie Kirk's murders or something like that, where they were actively seeking these submissions, has now been taken down. They've changed it to the Charlie Kirk Data Foundation, and they're framing their mission differently because I think they probably got some concerns from legal advice that, hey, this could actively be defamation. This could really be a lawsuit if you continue in this direction. But that's the effort we're talking about. Let's go ahead and put up some of the examples of the types of posts that are being flagged and people having they're being put on blast, and I don't know if it's appropriate to call it doxing necessarily, but put on blast.
It's not doxing if you put your name to it.
You're right. Put on blast and having their employers called in this mass organic effort. So here's some of them. These are some of the kind of more objectionable ones that we found. I don't get why everyone is posting to pray for him. This was worth it for people to have guns. He said it himself. Pray for his kids, not for him. Actually, how about people pray for all the innocent children whose lives were unfortunately worth it when they died died in school shootings so people can have their guns instead of these kids having their lives. I'm not happy he died, just pointing out karma. Another one, F around and find out. His entire brand was hate and violence. You attract what you preach. His last words were gang violence, trying to pen stuff on black people. Save your breath for the kiddos killed in Colorado yesterday. I'm cheering for the assassination. I don't mind saying it. He was a bastard, deserves to be amongst the dead, should have been tortured. You can't force people to mourn someone who hated us no matter how he died. It's okay to be happy when someone who hated you and called for your people's death dies, even if they are murdered. Call me old-fashioned. I remember when we used to be okay with shooting Nazis. Yeah. Let's put the next one up on the screen.
These are the edge cases.
Yeah, and honestly, to me, some of the other ones are, I'm not saying I agree with, but you know, if you're saying I'm not happy that he died, but you know, he was a hateful person, I don't know. To me, that's reasonable speech.
Look, and so that's the thing about reasonable speech is and this is a difference from free speech, First Amendment, and also polite society. I think the clearest example we had there was I'm cheering for assassination.
Yeah, right.
And
that to me is like, okay, I can see why if you're an employer, you know, that you would look at that and be like,
I'm not gonna say their name. It was a nurse, right?
Right.
As a nurse, especially, let's say this is a nurse in a hospital, and presumably, let's say you work in the ER or something like that. I mean, you know, to be honest, I'm gonna be crazy if I didn't admit this. When my child was in the NICU, I'm sitting there being like, look, you know, what if some of these people know who I am? Would they treat me differently? I pray no. I don't think so. The vast majority actually every single person I interacted in the hospital with was overwhelmingly kind, didn't say anything or any of that. And I think that is most people in the healthcare profession. But if you have somebody like this in the healthcare profession, and you have somebody who comes in with a MAGA hat on or something like that, we don't discriminate care. That's one of the most basics of healthcare. So yeah, like, I'm sorry you can't be employed, right? And even in some of the cases of saying like, I'm happy he died, I'm like, well, actually, like, it's one of those where I don't really think that's acceptable for people who are in positions where they have to interact with the general public. I also come back to this point about social media where, you know, I'm not sure if you know, but, you know, sociologically, if you read about this, after the Kennedy assassination, a lot of people actually hated Kennedy and were okay with it. Some people, there's stories of people in bars who were cheering after he was killed. Like, this was a thing. Now, in general, though, those people didn't face cancellation or whatever.
Right.
They did internally in their social group, but they weren't getting fired. You know why? Because they're not out, there's no media to go out there and say, yeah, I'm so happy he's dead. What compels a person to do that, you know? And it's one of those that's a sickness.
There also weren't mass efforts, though, to go and find those people in the bars.
There definitely would have been.
And put them, you know, and put them on blast, call their employers, whatever. Put B3 back up on the screen, or B4, sorry, back up on the screen, so we can get some of the other examples here. Okay, this one on the left, literally just quoting him.
Right.
Just quoting him. I mean, his own words. I saw someone say online, like, if I die or I'm killed, like, please put my words out there. Like, I'm proud of the things I said. I stand by them. So to act like it's, like, offensive to put up his quotes, I think is crazy. The next one says, let's go ahead and wrap this Charlie Kirk situation up in the next 48 hours. His killing was crazy to see. Wish that wasn't so easily accessible on my timeline. I definitely don't condone that violence. Shifting gears, y'all really try to paint this picture. He was this noble man trying to bridge America together is diabolical. This man was clearly racist, homophobic, sexist. Google, YouTube, and X are free. His ideology and his words were extremely dangerous. And the fact the American flag is being flown at half-staff is crazy work. I said what I said. I'm not going back and forth with nobody. Argue with your mama, not me. And then I tried to hold my tongue, but I genuinely do not know how any person could be saying Charlie Kirk was a good man. Of course, it's awful he was shot. So were more children at a school in Colorado yesterday, yet most of you haven't said a thing about that or any of the other 45 school shootings this year, someone who didn't believe in. Here's the thing for me, is like, I find the demand that people feel a certain way about his death to be really oppressive. You know, that like, the demand that everyone mourn and feel remorse and feel a certain way and express that feeling in an appropriate way, I think that that is extremely oppressive. Obviously, like I said before, and there's a bunch of these, by the way, where people are literally just quoting Charlie Kirk, especially the Second Amendment one, has gotten a lot of play, that are being targeted, and some who have already been fired, just literally. In fact, there was a professor who was fired for just posting that one quote. I think that's insane. I think, you know, the like expressing we've talked before about when someone who, and you and I will disagree about Charlie Kirk and his legacy likely, but someone who was a public political figure and they die or are killed, like, you don't have any obligation to whitewash them, what they said, what their impact was, et cetera. You know, if it's one thing if you're like at their funeral and you're trying to make them out to be an asshole, but I think it's important. I think it's actually really important for public discourse and for democratic functioning that you can talk honestly about people who have died or were killed and what they did and what they said and what their legacy was. And a lot of this is really policing the ability to actually honestly grapple with what he believed, what the impact was, and what he was doing. And I really object to that.
We should. I think we should object to people who are fired over that type of conversation.
Yeah.
I think we should. And look, let's be honest. Most people are not. As I said, most of this is a power grab. A lot of people are very upset. And I do think that probably just factors into it more than anything is the level of emotion and the general feeling for people who are involved who are like, hey, a lot of these people would cheer my own death. I mean, to be honest, that's probably been my top takeaway. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is just how it would be. That's really sick. And there's a lot of deep badness in our culture that has even led us to that. But I do think we should all also just put some baseline stuff on the table if we're all going to be honest. Everyone believes in a little bit of cancel culture, like a little bit. The question,
it's a question of where you draw the line.
We draw the line. That is a social question. As I said here with that nurse, you got to go. Teacher, got to go. Social worker, you got to go. American Airlines pilot, you got to go. If you are generally in a position, especially of responsibility, power, and if you're taxpayer funded, it's like I felt this way about the whole trans thing in classrooms. Same thing. I'm like, oh, you think you have a right to our taxpayer dollars and to say what you want? No, absolutely not. And this is just generally what it broadly gets to of the question around norms for us and shame. So yeah, if you literally are a open fascist, you're like, I don't believe in democracy and I think Hitler was good, like, yeah, you gotta go, man. Like, you can't be generally employed here just for polite society reasons. We do need some shame. If you actively say Charlie deserved what he got, I think you gotta go. I really do. And I don't think that you should ever be in a position, let's not say ever. At the current moment, you should not be in a position where you're especially in a position of responsibility and or generally reflective of what a company's values are. Now, part of the issue, as we've said as well, is that it goes into the realm of mass hysteria really quick. And so what we need to do is kind of separate those two things because, look, we're already in the race to the bottom. I already know none of this will penetrate the national conversation. It's obvious, okay? Yeah. It's just people are out for blood. People were out for blood during Me Too and BLM. Everybody knows it. It was obvious, and it was used as a political tool also to go after people's enemies to great effect, and it also led to a massive pushback. So that conversation you were talking about earlier, I forget who, I think Glenn might have written about Christopher Hitchens. Yeah, I was reading about it. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought really about that. And look, we don't have to have a hagiography for every person who dies. It's not required. This is a free country, and you can believe in a special. Actually, it's probably important actually to sit down and kind of say, okay, what are the benefits, etc. What was this person's legacy? You could talk to your children about it. But there is a big difference also for coming out and just outwardly cheering it on. And actually, I would say the sickness is not just the people who post it publicly. The anonymity is personally what gets me the most, because those are the ones with hundreds of thousands of retweets and or likes, and you're like, okay, like that? I mean, when there's no consequences potentially, people are like very willing to hit the retweet button, very willing to hit the like button, and that is the same irony and dehumanization that led to his assassination. That's the part where I really find sick, because everyone's hiding behind their keyboard. People feel no way whatsoever about hitting RT on he deserved it or lol or joking about it. I mean, that's the same LeMayo, you're gay on the bullet. It's the same mindset. I'm not equating the two whatsoever. I'm saying though that mindset, and listen, I've been guilty of it too. I'll be free and admit it. I'm a human being. Sometimes you see a joke which is cruel as shit and you're like, that's so fun. You know what? I'm done with that. I'm done with that after this because I see it now.
One thing I will say though is, look, I haven't I haven't done a comprehensive study of the sentiments that are being expressed, the people that are being put on blast. But, you know, when we were trying to compile some of the worst and the ones that you and I both would be like, you shouldn't be fired for that.
Yeah.
There were way more of the, you shouldn't be fired for that.
Well, that's why I'm comparing it to BLM and Me Too. Most people are not out there being like, hey, you know, George Floyd deserved to die, okay? There's a big difference between that and saying, oh, I don't think that violence and looting is justified because of a dumb MLK quote, which is out of context. Now, a lot more people got fired for the latter than for the former. Same with Me Too. A huge number of the quote-unquote Me Too cancellations were complete bullshit and or were ones much better left off to HR and a conversation or whatever than actually being able to be go. So yes, and look, in some ways, maybe you could take that away as a good thing in that most people are not, you know, most people are good. I don't think that they actively want people to die, but that's kind of why I brought it to the anonymity conversation, because that's important where behind the screen, they'll hit the retweet button.
Yeah.
He deserved to die.
Well, and
that's sick.
Did Elon make likes public again? Did I see that? I don't know if that's true or not, but they should be public. I think they should be public. I think.
Wait, no, for my own sake, I don't want that.
You don't want that public?
Well,
I want them public.
I use them as bookmarks. I don't always like when I like something, it's not that I like the post. It's so that I can go to my likes. You can, but it's not on. Listen, if you look at your profile,
like adjust your
yes, but then I have to click a different page. The like page is very easy.
You can't be against the anonymity and be like, I still want the likes to be private.
I don't like them I don't like them because I want to like them. Listen, fine, make it public. All right, go. All right, my following list is public. My followers are all public. Go ahead. If you want to audit me, be my guest.
Here's what I'll say, and then I do want to talk about the government piece, because that's honestly to me the scariest piece. Is if we had a healthy culture, I would have confidence that, you know, the hysteria, that it is already a hysteria, like a witch hunt hysteria for sure. The people that are being tagged who just like quoted Charlie Kirk or whatever, and they're being fired and their employers are being called, like, it's crazy, okay? I would feel less stressed about that if we had a healthy culture, but we don't.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that is the sort of thing, like you said, everyone does believe that some things are out of bounds, that you can't just like say literally anything and not think there are gonna be any consequences in your life, right? Where you draw that line is a constant sort of like ebb and flow, tug of war in the culture. It shouldn't be from the government. It should come organically from the culture, as you have these cases where it's like, okay, well, that went too far. Now we're going to draw the line here. Or, you know what, maybe we shouldn't this has gotten out of control. We need to be more whatever. But I think part of what is so unnerving is I don't think any of us have confidence that we have a healthy enough culture to draw these lines and boundaries in a place that is going to be sort of like broadly
I totally agree.
accepted.
And the reason I especially feel like the worst about it is because I can see the American right wing doing it now. And I have no doubt whatsoever that when the Democrats are in power, that it's going to flip, and it'll be the exact same. There'll be Truth and Reconciliation commissions. It'll be all out. Anybody who advocated immigration restriction or whatever is a Nazi. It's going to come full force back. Maybe they'll be more polite about it, but considering the BLM environment, considering Me Too, like this is baked in my opinion, to like the broad, like liberal industrial complex. It's really baked into any political power movement. Maybe the truth is that that's always been a hallmark of American political culture and power is not just to use, but like to have big tentpole events become power grabs in the last 25 years. In our initial reaction, the reason I focused so much on 9/11, and I knew this was coming from a mile away. I could see it coming, is because think about what it was like at that moment, where they hate us for our freedoms. I mean, by the way, you want to talk about real cancel culture? Like go back and think about the Iraq War and people who spoke out of it. They didn't have no internet or whatever to make their own career. They were dead, gone from the culture, dead. And that is scary. And that's part of what I want to avoid more than anything. But unfortunately, and this is a segue to the government piece, where you saw how quickly it went from they hate us for our freedoms and to Saddam hates us for our freedoms. I mean, that was a 2-year period. And then we're invading Iraq. And like That's the thing I worry
And
about.
losing civil liberties, we never
Exactly,
got
with
that.
the Patriot Act. What is
We
it,
never got
October
that.
something, 2001 was the Patriot Act that people didn't remember famously in the Fahrenheit 9/11 documentary. They didn't even read it. And it's they rubber stamped. And I had thought actually that things had changed with a lot of the reaction, but I believe today that it is the exact same. I don't think anybody has learned any lessons whatsoever from the post 9/11 era. And also inevitably, what I always caution people is if you don't act from a more principled view and and at the end of the day, people were elected, we elect you to take a breath and to be stewards. Like we're podcast, we can fire a take. The consequences are not that high. The consequences are very high when you're in the government. And that's exactly what happened after 9/11. We had a bunch of people who were like, hey, this is a pretty convenient time for a little power grab. And it never came back. And then what? Obama was elected as a rejection of that. And what happens? He turns it up on steroids. And then what happens after that? Trump comes in, he's like, hey, I got all these powers, might as well use them. Biden never retracts any of them. Now we're on the verge of a Venezuela regime change operation under a 2001 AUMF for terrorism. And allegedly...
Have they even actually announced
fine,
that that's the authority that they're using? I mean, that's the thing is they don't even feel the need to say what authority they have.
But where does that come from? That comes from the same thing. I can bomb 15 different countries, and Congress has authorized it, and they're neutered. So that is the road that it led us down. And really, it was really poignant to actually speak about this, the 24 years after 9/11. Because I go back every year, I reread this book called Days of Fire, written by Peter Baker, the exact TikTok of everything that happened. I'm like, man, we haven't learned a damn thing.
Well, within that spirit, let's listen to Stephen Miller. This is B2 talking about his reaction and what the government will do after Charlie Kirk's killing.
And let me tell you something I've not shared with anybody, but the last message that Charlie Kirk gave to me before he joined his creator in heaven was he said that we have to dismantle and take on the radical left organizations in this country that are fomenting violence. That was the last message that he sent me before that assassin stole him from all of us. And we are going to do that under President Trump's leadership. I don't care how. It could be a RICO charge, a conspiracy charge, conspiracy against the United States, insurrection, but we are going to do what it takes to dismantle the organizations and the entities that are fomenting riots, that are doxing, that are trying to inspire terrorism, and that are committing acts of wanton violence. It has to stop. And my message is to all of the domestic terrorists in this country spreading this evil hate, you want us to live in fear? We will not live in fear, but you will live in exile. Because the power of law enforcement under President Trump's leadership will be used to find you, will be used to take away your money, take away your power, and if you've broken the law, to take away your freedom, Sean.
So there you go. And I mean, there's a few things here. First of all, there's the context of the Trump administration. I mean, they used big balls getting mugged to send the National Guard to Washington, D.C. The story of this administration has been using real or imagined crises to grab power. That's what they do. So I know you and I both, when this happened, we knew where this was heading, and many other people did as well. So Stephen Miller just making it plain, and also claiming that that was Charlie Kirk's last message to him. Whether or not that's true is another matter. Doesn't really matter, because they're going to use it as a pretext for further crackdown. And then the other piece is, and this is something that Klippenstein pointed out to me, is like, the technology now is so much more advanced than in the Patriot Act era. Like the level of mass surveillance and mass targeting that you can do using AI is complete. It's complete now. So you've got, Palantir. I recorded a segment with her take. Actually, I don't know if this is going to air at this point because it all feels outdated now, but about somebody going on Fox News and pitching their Israeli AI threat detection, like pre-crime bullshit. Like, these are technologies that exist now. This is part of what we talked about with regard to Doge too, when they were in the government, and the idea was they're compiling this mass database of every little thing the government knows about you. Think of how much that is. They know your Social Security. They know what you're paying in taxes. They know, if you're divorced and what you're paying in child support. It's trying to start a small business. All of those things they have housed. And it's never really been possible to conglomerate all of that and cross-check it with everything you've ever posted on social media or anywhere online. Now that tech exists. Right, the camera technology, AI-driven camera technology with facial recognition, all of that.
You're just describing China. Like, this is what
all of that exists now in a way that it didn't previously. And so, the maximal amount of what they want to do is now on the table. And I mentioned this before, I'll just mention it one more time. Trump is out there sharing a TikTok saying, hey, we need a Charlie Kirk, effectively like Ministry of Truth law to pass so that the government has the right to go in and sort out what the media is saying and deem whether it's fact or fiction. So again, these sort of like, the worst fears that were expressed by the right during the Biden era about the way the government could be weaponized against conservative media and the way that the government could be weaponized against conservatives and, deny them their basic rights. That is all gelling and coming to fruition under the Trump administration. And, I know they're already announcing it, that they're going to use Charlie Kirk's murder to further those ends.
One of the sad parts is a real misbelief, I think, by a lot of the right, that this is organized in the way that the Weather Underground is. And so, by the way, everybody keeps, one of the things that annoys me most is when people post books and they clearly have not read the book. So the book that everyone is referencing is called Days of Rage. It is one of the best books ever written in modern times, and it is a history of the 70s violence era, specifically with the Weather Underground, the Symbionese Liberation Army, and all these insane left-wing groups at the time who were actually like bombing, right? Like they bombed the Capitol. It was crazy. And there's a separate conversation about how they all just kind of pleaded guilty and then, just immersed into polite society, but whatever. My point broadly about the book is if you read about it, these were actual social cells, for example, who Bill Ayers and the Boudins, right, were together in a network planning attacks. What does the hallmark of all this violence show us? It's the opposite now.
Yeah.
It's not just the lone wolf theory. It's that even our domestic terrorists are the people who are at home doing nothing with their lives, probably addicted to pornography based on Mr. Robinson's, little jokes and all of that, and addicted to gaming in a Discord, sitting there, apparently, according to law enforcement, his own boyfriend or whatever doesn't even know what he's doing, drops out of college, gaming all day online. This isn't even organized to a certain extent. It's like a radicalization of the mind by the self. And that happens at the school shooter level. It's the same thing. Loser, didn't know anybody,
It's the same profile.
spent a lot of time on the internet. If you look at every single one of these people, a lot of it is mental illness plus internet plus nothing going on is a recipe for disaster. By the way, I put drugs and porn into that too. Especially if you look at the trans one, the Nazi one, addicted to weed, just saying, which of course leads to mental illness at a much higher level, schizophrenia, outbreak of violence. If you look at the profile, similarly for most of these people, the amount of time these people are logging on is probably 12 to 15 hours a day. I don't think that's an exaggeration. Complete disconnect. And so there's a theory that the FBI, like in the 50s, one of the most famous FBI operations was infiltration and basically the destruction of the KKK. So what they did, again, what was the KKK at that time? It was people together, secretly meeting, planning, organized violent attacks against people who were, civil rights activists, busts and stuff. Let's think about even, in the Malcolm X or any of that. Same thing. What was the Nation of Islam? It's an actual church, it's a religious organization, people who come together and all of them. And even the people who allegedly killed Malcolm X, although there's still a lot of questions around that, were part of that and were allegedly inspired by that. But my point is that it was in person and it was actually organized. Now we're in the opposite era. Violence is not organized. Broadly, most of it is online. There was this huge talk after BLM, I remember, of people who were like, who are the NGOs funding this? I'm like, guys, that's not what happened. Because I saw it for myself. People who I knew who are out there, were rioting or whatever. It was people locked in their homes on the internet. That's it. They were mad and they were like, oh, I've been locked in my house. Might as well just go burn some shit down. And then people who are criminals use that as an opportunity to go and loot. And then it's much more of an elite conversation who I think excused all of that and basically encouraged it. But my point is, I genuinely just don't believe that there were broad networks telling people to go riot. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I just think people were sitting at home. Everybody they were like, this opportunity to be together, and they went out there. Now, are there NGOs who fund that, BLM and all that? Absolutely, don't get me wrong. Quote, going after that, I'm not even really sure what that means. But there is no theory of dismantling the lone wolf violence that we have today that doesn't involve a genuine national convo for parents and more, hopefully backed up by the state from an informational perspective of get your children off of the internet unsupervised. I don't know if you saw that.
The photo.
Picture of Robinson.
Yeah.
Tyler Robinson's mother in 2013 being like, oh, here he is with his computer. He doesn't even want to talk to us anymore. It's like the Breaking Bad meme.
He's this adorable little kid.
He's like a little boy on the internet. And as a new parent, I'm like, oh my God, that is how quickly it happens. That is how quickly. That was 2013. 12 years later, he assassinates somebody in cold blood. And if you look at the screen time awareness conversation, people think that people are aware. No, it's an elites thing now. It's the vast majority of lower middle class and middle class people. They're going screen time all day long. And I don't know. I don't even know if the government can help you at this point. For me, I would mandate a national phone ban in all public schools. I don't know if that's legal. It probably isn't, but that would be my number one thing. Maybe, honestly, Chinese-style laws which shut stuff off at 8 p.m. It's not a horrible idea. We have got to think radically at this point.
So a few things that I want to raise. First of all, just to underscore your point, what you're saying is, I think, correct, that the hallmark of those terror networks was actually connection.
No, it was actual in person.
And the hallmark of this terror is disconnection.
Yes, correct.
And I think that's a very, very important distinction to make. You know, I do like as a parent, the other thing about the nature of the content that the Tyler Robinsons, or I think the school shooter on the same day, I think his name was Desmond Kelly, of the world are consuming, we're also in this era where the parents really, they know the internet for the things they use it for, whatever. They're on Facebook or they're emailing or they're looking at a news website or a gossip website or whatever. Like, they really don't know or understand. It's like a foreign language. It's a totally different culture that their kids may be engaging with. And so, you know, there's just a total lack of understanding. We've covered too the way now AI adds a whole other layer of that, where there was that kid who killed himself. Parents go in and look at the ChatGPT logs. They're like, holy hell. We thought he was just asking ChatGPT for like help with his homework. Meanwhile, this was like his best bud who was encouraging him towards suicide. So there's also this vast gulf between where the technology is, what type of content is online, and how the vast majority of parents actually understand the internet. And by the way, you see it too in like the FBI and law enforcement response here. They had no idea what the hell they were talking about, because that's why they put out this transgender ideology on the bullets thing. They looked at, I don't know, like, you're gay, laughing my ass off, and think that was like, maybe the bulge, like, and so they had no idea what they were looking at. So law enforcement doesn't understand it. Parents don't understand it. You know, most of society doesn't. So you've got that disconnect. You know, I don't know. In terms of what to do about it, I genuinely don't know, because I do want to underscore again, plenty of other countries have these same things and don't have mass school shootings every other day. So there is something uniquely American about what is going on here, which is why, and I'm always leery of like the civil liberties crackdown, you can't do this, and like blanket bans from the federal government. But I can't say I'd put it off the table either, because the other thing is I see how addictive the technology is, how hard it is. My son in particular, something about boys, not to be overly gendered, but typically boys, that it's such a pull that it just blocks out the sun. It blocks out everything else in their life if you let them, which is why that photo of young Tyler Robinson, and they say, oh, we just got him his computer stuff, I guess we're never going to see him again, is really, as a parent, is genuinely terrifying.
Exactly. I'm looking at it right now. It's like heartbreaking just looking at it. And maybe that sounds crazy, but it's like you can watch it happen in real time, literally.
Yeah.
How this happens. So I don't know. I mean, I think that is the great question of our age. I'm not, all of this to say like, look, what's coming is coming, and that'll obviously ignite a backlash in and of itself, and court challenges and cultural conversation, et cetera. But I have no other take than, as parent, if all you can do is step up, you need to step up, like now. Because I'm online enough to know that this shit exists, but not online enough to get overt furry
memes,
references. And, I'm like, but I know it exists. But
I mean, he dressed up as like a Groypermine for Halloween.
I saw.
You know?
Well, it's not just Groyper. You're talking about the Slavic. See, I wish I didn't even know what the Slavic squad. Yes, I know what the Slavic.
But like, that's how
squad
much.
is. That's how online I am, and just goes to show you that even that exactly. Imagine being Jake Tapper on CNN trying to be like explain the Slavic squad. Okay, I'm like laughing about it, but it's not funny because the vast majority of people who are that age, they can't even conceive of an internet like that. Which is, I'm just on the edge. I know it exists. You know, I get some of the references in the memes, but I'm not deep in the culture or any of that. Like, and so then now I put myself. My kid is 4 months old, so let me put 18 years in the future. I'm at least aware enough to know I'm not going to know a goddamn thing about what's happening, and because that's how rapidly all of this stuff moves.
Yep.
Okay. I hope it was productive. This is literally what. By the way, this is what I hope most of you guys are taking away. Don't sit at home and post stuff about, oh, I'm so happy he's assassinated or whatever, or the opposite and being like, fuck those people. We need to go get them and destroy them. Sit down and talk it out. Because like I just said, everybody believes in a little bit of cancel culture. Decide in your own community or at your school or whatever and be like, how are we all going to talk about this? If you're a teacher, you should have two people talk about it just the way that we did about, well, everybody believes a little bit, and this was some of the objectionable things I found about Charlie, and the other person says, well, this is the other thing that I found, and here's kind of the way that we would like to approach it and have societal norms, because that's healthy. But this stuff, I don't know. I really have never been more black-pilled about our society, but that's a good turn to the Epstein.
Fight that instinct, Saagar, because that black-pilling and nihilism is a problem.
You're right, and see, that's the problem. I'm just as victim to the same social culture and structure that everybody else apparently is just, is either loving or is just either, involuntarily going down the same path. So let's get to the Epstein story.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show, ad-free, and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.